right. And where are you located?
I'm in Minneapolis.
Where?
Minneapolis.
Oh, okay. Man, there's always some shit going on there in Minneapolis, ain't there?
Right.
Some not so good shit.
So I can just start from the beginning. By the time you were a teenager, you were already professionally playing in bands and stuff, right?
Well, I started when I was 14, and I started out playing like graduation parties, backyard barbecues, and high school dances. And then when I was about 16, I played in my first bar. And then then it graduated from there where I started playing bars and basically just clubs for about 10 years. And then when I was about 25, I moved to LA to get my first big pro break. And I ended up getting my first break with a band in New York called Blackjack, which Michael Bolton was in the band, and Bruce Kulick. And so then that started the dominoes falling. And then rehearsing with Blackjack, I met Benny Mardones, and I ended up playing on his record, which had the hit single Into the Night. So now I had a track record where I played in a professional band with Blackjack, and then Benny Mardones' top 10 single. And then my involvement with Polygram led to the Pat Travers Band. I found out through Polygram, people I knew at the record company, that he was going to be changing drummers. So I went after that gig and got it. And that was in 81 to 83. So I didn't really start playing, my first pro album was done when I was about 25.
Okay.
So, and prior to that, I just did clubs and stuff and honed my craft playing cover material, of the day. And then from the Travers gig, I met someone backstage at a Travers gig, and he ultimately signed Cyndi Lauper a couple of years later, and he remembered me from the Travers gig. So I got Cyndi. That's how I got Cindy's gig. And Cindy's gig was at the time the biggest gig I ever done. It was awesome.
Right.
And the cool thing about that, I joined her band when nobody knew who she was, and then 5 months later she was selling 5 million records.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then Joan Jett was in the audience at one of the Cindy gigs. And 5 years later, when Joan needed a drummer, she called me. And then in between that, I did a record with a German band called Kraft. And then they wanted me to do the tour in support of the record. And then we ended up going to Europe and opening for Queen for 3 months, 3 or 4 months in Europe, which was awesome. And then after that, I did the Monkees, and I started with the Monkees as a drummer on one of their reunion tours, and they liked me. So I ended up doing almost every reunion tour from 1987 until 2012 when Davy Jones passed away. So that basically in a nutshell. And then after that, the Monkees I did on and off for, I don't know how many years, 20 something years or whatever. But in between those tours, I ended up doing Johnny Winter. I played with Johnny Winter for a few years. I played with Bo Diddley for a few years. And so that basically in a nutshell is how my life happened, professionally anyway. So.
And even was your appearance on the Carson show, was that before Blackjack even?
That was even before Blackjack. As I said, I was toiling around in clubs for 10 years, and I moved to LA to get my first big break in the music business. And while I was in LA, I was such a big fan of Carson. He was doing the show from Burbank at the time. And I was such a huge fan of his. I just sent away for tickets, and boom, I ended up on Stump the Band. That was awesome. That was a very nice memory, man. But that was before I did anything professionally.
Right. And I do want to, Blackjack is one of my favorite bands, and I love both the albums. So I do want to talk about that. I know you guys were kind of just brought together because they thought that you would sound good together. Was there like a immediate chemistry between you and the other guys?
Well, yeah, there was immediate chemistry. And how I got that gig was really, really, it's a testament to, if you believe in yourself, and regardless of what problems exist on your way to your goal, you just have to believe in yourself enough to just keep going and have the tenacity to keep going. I moved to LA. I for 3 years living there, nothing really happened for me professionally. I did a couple of, I did a tour with Steppenwolf, one original member or whatever. But anyway, after about 2.5 years in LA, I got the opportunity to audition for Rod Stewart. And I brought there was backline already provided, but I ended up bringing my own drums, and I ended up having, instead of sitting on the drums that were in the studio ready for me, I brought my own drum set because I was really insecure about playing on another drum set. So I made Rod and the band wait. Needless to say, I didn't get that gig. And the song that I had to play was Tonight's the Night, which is like kick, snare, and hi-hat. And I bring a double bass drum set to the audition, which was like totally, in retrospect, it was a totally idiot thing to do. So I didn't get the gig, but while I was in LA, I befriended one of my idols from the old days, Carmine Appice, who played in the band called the Vanilla Fudge. And I befriended him in LA, and I called him really depressed, and I told him, hey, about the mistake I made. And I suggested to him to go for the gig. I said, I don't think they found anybody, Carmine. Why don't you go for the gig? And he said, well, you got management's number? So I said, yeah. So I gave him Rod's manager's number. Carmine went down and got the gig. So, from an insignificant little guy trying to make my way through the music business, I ended up giving one of my idols the gig of his life. Mm-hmm. So, but what goes around comes around. And now in the depths of my depression, I wrote out a resume that really had nothing on it. And I said, you know what, this is going to be my last ditch effort to try to do something. And I got the names and addresses of managers of bands that I really, really like. And I sent 50 resumes, typewritten, one finger at a time resumes. This is 1978. Mm-hmm. And I called Carmine. I said, Carmine, can I use your name on a resume? And he said, sure, Sandy. So I put Carmine in his number, the only reference I had on the resume. I sent them to 50 managers. Now, check this out. You can't write this. Sent them to 50 managers. One of the managers was Peter Grant of Led Zeppelin. He managed Led Zeppelin, based in England. Mm-hmm. The resume was funneled through Led Zeppelin's lawyer's office in New York, and they were supposed to forward the resume to Peter Grant. They never forwarded. The lawyer opened up my resume. Right at that time, the lawyer for Led Zeppelin is shopping a tape of songs written by Michael Bolton and Bruce. Mm-hmm. Trying to get a band deal from those songs written by them. Now record companies are responding to the lawyer saying, we want to see this band. We like the songs. He needed a drummer and a bass player. Right at that particular time, he opens my resume. His name was Steve Weiss, the lawyer for Led Zeppelin. Opens my resume and sees, he's looking for a drummer right at that time. And now my resume arrives and he opens it. His name isn't even on it. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, he's in LA. I want somebody from New York. So he turns the page of the resume before he throws it in the garbage, and he sees Carmine's name in it. And used to be Vanilla Fudge's attorney in the 60s. So he knows Carmine personally. He calls Carmine and he says, who's this guy, Sandy? Carmine gives me a reference. He says, he's awesome, whatever. The next call I get was from Steve Weiss, Led Zeppelin's manager. You want to fly to New York and audition for this yet unnamed band? We're close to a deal, blah, blah, blah. So I flew to New York, ended up getting the gig. Played with them. I stayed at my mother's house in Staten Island. I played with them with what was to become Blackjack. Bruce and Michael, and me and another bass player. And then the next day they asked me to come back. I played and Jimmy Haslip arrived. Yep. He came off the road. So we played. It was instant chemistry. A couple of days later, we auditioned for Polygram and we got the deal with Polygram. And that was the beginning of my career. How it happened on a fluke like that, it still amazes me every time I talk about it. But so that's how I got the Blackjack gig. And yes, there was an instant chemistry. And a couple of months later, we found ourselves in Criteria Studios doing our first record with Tom Dowd, who was a legendary producer. I'm sure you know who he is. So that was the start of it. That was the Blackjack gig. And then rehearsing with Blackjack for that Worlds Apart record, the second record, I was in the hallway getting a soda at the soda machine. And this guy taps me on the shoulder, and it's Benny Mardones. And he's saying, hey, you playing drums in that room?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You want to play on my record?" I agreed to play on his record, and Into the Night came off of that record.
Yep.
So it was because of my fluke Blackjack gig, I ended up getting Benny's gig, and then that was the start of it. That was the start of it. It almost didn't happen for me, and I don't know what would have happened if I didn't send those resumes out, because after I blew that Rod Stewart audition, I was very, very depressed. Very depressed. My first marriage was falling apart. I had no money, 3,000 miles away from home. You know, people in LA were saying one thing and doing another. I got very bummed out and very, I was very disoriented about the music business because people were lying to me and ripping me off. And you know, I was very disillusioned and started hurting myself physically. And I was at the bottom. I was way, way at the bottom. But something told me, keep going, and write those resumes, write the resumes. So I had faith in God that he was going to make, you know, kind of put the puzzle pieces together, and it happened like that.
Mm-hmm. And when Blackjack was touring for the first album, was that a completely pleasant experience, or were like other people that you were opening for, did they like treat you guys nicely, or how did that all work? Yeah, when the album first came out, we did a couple of local club gigs around New York, as sort of like a warm up gigs, and then we ended up Steve Weiss, Led Zeppelin's attorney, who was our attorney, ended up getting us an opening slot for Peter Frampton. Yep.
And that was the Frampton tour following the Frampton Comes Alive album. Mm-hmm. So he put a record out called I'm In You, and we toured opening for Peter Frampton for about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks or something. It's kind of a short tour. And then we came back. The album, the first album we did videos and stuff even before MTV. But it didn't really live up to the expectations of the record company, that first album. Mm-hmm. So they gave us a second record, and we did that in Woodstock at LeBon Helm Studio. And then after that, they basically lost faith in us. Polygram did, and we didn't tour in support of that second record, the Worlds Apart record. But then at that point, you know, I did Benny's record with the Into the Night came off of that, and then I ended up doing the Travers gig, and that put me on the road for the next 2 years or something.
And do you have a personal preference between the first or second Blackjack album?
Well, the first one was special because that was like a breath of fresh air. And a couple of months earlier, I was about to ace myself and drink myself to death. And my everything was falling apart in my life. And now I find myself at Criteria Studios with a band on a salary, being an equal member of the band, with Tom Dowd as my producer. And Tom Dowd is the name I read on the back of records. I don't know if you know who he is, but I would Google. If I were you, I'd Google his name. And so he's a legendary producer, gave me some really worthwhile fatherly advice in terms of my playing and my approach to drumming. And I carry that advice throughout my whole career. So the first album was special in that regard because it was like sunshine after like months and months of cloudy and rainy days. It was like a sunshiny day and warm weather. It was just awesome. We did it in North Miami, so the weather was awesome. And then the second album was, you know, the first album had so much hype surrounding it. And, you know, and Polygram just basically gave us a budget to do the second record just as an afterthought. They weren't really behind it anymore. So, and we did it in Woodstock in the middle of the winter. And the producer that we had, I'm not going to really give him any credit because he doesn't deserve any credit. The producer that we had was like distracted with white powdery substances all the time. So he was like non-existent. And basically Bruce and Michael helped produce that second World Apart record. Okay. And there's some good songs on it. I like the material on the record, but the whole vibe surrounding the record was kind of like, all right, what's next? Whatever. Jimmy couldn't play on a lot of the record because he was busy with other stuff. So we had some bass player come in. Mark Clark came in and played on some tracks. So the air was out of the balloon at that point. You know what I mean? But it was still fun playing those songs because I like the way Michael and Bruce write. And so, but the first album was my favorite.
I know that you you kept a lot of promotional material for the first album too, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yes, I have the album framed on the wall there. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can get you to do this. 1 second. There's the first one. And then there's the second one.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I got a lot of memorabilia around my studio, man. It's of all the acts I played on, all the acts I played with. So, yeah, I'm a keeper of memorabilia. I like memorabilia. I like reminders of good times and stuff. So over there, I got my whole collection of hotel keys. I have every hotel key I ever got my whole life except for 3.
Oh, wow.
So they're like 25. You want to see that? 2,500 hotel keys. 1 second.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. These are all the actual hard keys. And they go back to when keys used to look like this.
Oh, yeah.
And this is from Japan. But like these are all the European keys. They have this door knocker on them, whatever. And then down here I got all my card keys, and then here I got all my backstage passes, all my laminates. But now when I travel, they give you the key on. They send you the barcode in they send you the barcode in your phone, and you wave your phone over the lock, and that's how you get in. So anyway. Yeah, I'm a collector of stuff. I like collecting stuff, especially when it spurs a really good memory. Oh, I didn't show you this. That's my bass drum head.
Oh, wow. That's awesome, yeah.
Yeah. That's a Black Horse Jones. Yeah, I got a lot of shit. It'll take me like there's my muse. That's my inspiration right there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I have a lot of stuff to remind me of the good days, and there's still good days. I'm still very grateful for what I have, and so yeah, I like collecting stuff. It just brings back some really good memories, and that's all.
Did you stay in touch with Michael after the band broke up?
I see him on occasion. I think the last time was maybe about 15, 20 years ago, actually. It was his 50th birthday.
Okay.
I was invited to his 50th birthday. And just recently, I see Bruce very often. Not very often, but I see him more often. We do fantasy camps together, rock and roll fantasy camps together. And Jimmy and Bruce and myself, we were on a Zoom call together. So we were reunited on Zoom by this radio personality that wanted he's a big fan of Blackjack too.
Yeah, I watched.
So you watched it?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So as a result of that, we said, hey man, let's try to get Michael on and we'll do a whole reunion. And I reached out to Michael around Christmas time. And he got back to me, says, hey, man, I'm really busy. Good to hear from you, Sandy. I'm really busy over the holidays, but reach out to me like February. Mm-hmm. And I reached back out to him, and I haven't heard from him yet. So we're still trying to get the 4 of us again together, but we'll see. Michael's really busy. I think he's working on a remake of The Dating Game. There used to be a show on TV like in this. So I think he's he's trying to get that off the ground. So he's busy with stuff, but there's no bad vibe there. We all get along. It's just a matter of working our schedules out together to get together again. But I think in the future, me, Bruce, and Michael will at least get together on Zoom again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nice because it's kind of hard to tell sometimes, or at least until recently, that if Michael was like comfortable talking about his rock period.
Yeah, it's rumored that he tries to put that period under the rug, but that was great experience for all of us, and he was like a Rod Stewart, Bob Seger. We were what the material was like. So I thought there was some really strong songs on that first record, and
Right.
And some of those songs were covered. I think Kanye West covered a bit of one of the songs or whatever, and some rap guys sampled I think someone told me the other day that a rap guy sampled some of Power of Love.
Yep.
So you probably know about more about the history of Blackjack than I do, but yeah, I mean, I have nothing but good memories because again, that whole project, even both the records, was my first entry into being involved with a record company and having a big budget and all of that touring, and it taught me a lot. I'm really grateful for that opportunity for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't imagine that because I'm a big fan of Benny as well, and I can't imagine that being in the studio recording that album, that must have been just incredible.
It was great. It was great. It was awesome. Benny was just a ball of energy, and again, I met him just on a fluke rehearsing with Blackjack for that second record, and he said, "Do you want to play on my record?" Based on him hearing me outside in the hallway outside the room where I was rehearsing, and I said, "Well, I can't leave my band. I'm in." He goes, "No, you don't have to leave your band. I'll just pay you for the session. I just want you to play. I want your energy on my record."
Mm-hmm.
So he said, "Come down to the studio," and I'm in a studio down the hall playing some songs with my producer and wondering, organizing the songs for the record. "Come down and I'll play you some stuff." And he sat down. I went over there. He sat down at the piano and started playing Into the Night. Just him playing piano and singing with no other instruments. Yep. And I felt like I heard that song a million times before. It sounded like a hit to me. Mm-hmm. So that's what made me commit to the record. But there is a lot of other good songs on that Never Run, Never Hide record. That's on the wall too. There's some really good songs. Hold Me Down comes to mind. Might Have Been Love comes to mind. She's So French comes to mind. Of course, Into the Night. There's some really good songs. And I became really close friends with Benny. And based on that, I was down in Miami doing that record for about 2 weeks. He didn't want me to leave. You got to hang out, man. I want your vibe around. Even though you're done with your tracks, I want you to stay around. So I stayed around an extra weekend just to hang out because he didn't want me to leave. He was awesome. I stayed in touch with him up until the end. Not often, but every few months I'd reach out to him. And then he started getting sick with Parkinson's and all of that. But I'm still in touch with Bobby Tepper, who co-wrote Into the Night and played keyboards on that record. Yep. I'm still in touch with him. I'm still in touch with Lee Fox, the bass player that played on the record. Mm-hmm. Still in touch with him. He plays with Blondie now, Lee Fox. So he's a really good guy. I hear from him all the time. Every time something happens in Nashville, like something weather or a flood or what, he reaches out. "Hey, Sandy, I hope you're okay. He's awesome. Lee Fox is awesome. Great bass player. So I like to stay in touch with people I'm involved with, especially when I get along with them and they represent a period of my life that really is meaningful to me. And, good friends, old friends are very valuable, and you can't buy those relationships. It's just, I was on a Zoom call last night, and there was some friends of mine that I haven't seen. It was like a drummer hang. And there was some friends of mine that I haven't seen in 30 years on that Zoom call. It was awesome.
I can probably guess the answer to this, but since you were rehearsing with Blackjack in New York in '79, and I know that Madonna was trying to get noticed at that same time too. Did you ever come in contact with her or no?
No. And as if my memory is correct, but Madonna came on the scene a little later, like early '80s.
Yeah.
Because Cyndi, when I was with Lauper, she exploded. And Madonna wasn't really happening. And this was 1984. I may be wrong, but just as from my memory, Madonna really didn't come around until like the middle of where Cyndi was Madonna ripped off at the beginning a lot of Cyndi's downtown vintage clothing vibe, with all the jewelry and the way she dressed and whatever. And then Cyndi took some time off after that first record. And I think during that period where Cyndi was basically off the scene, that's when Madonna came out with Like a Virgin or whatever the first single was for her. No, I never ran across her. She would frequent some clubs that I used to go to. This one called Danceteria in New York City. but I never really came across. I never really met Madonna or anything like that. But, you know, I used to hang out at Studio 54 too, in New York, and you know, we might have been in the same club at the same time, but I never really physically crossed paths with her.
Did you ever get to meet John Lennon or Elvis or anybody like that either?
Never met Elvis. That was a little bit before my time. I came very close to meeting John Lennon because I had a good friend who played on Double Fantasy.
Yep.
The last record. His name was Earl Slick, and I knew him from Staten Island growing up. His name is Frank Manaloni. And when he was in New York doing Double Fantasy, the long story short was John Lennon didn't allow any outsiders at the session. But while they were doing some rough mixes, they were listening back on some rough mixes. John Lennon told everybody in the band that they can bring one guest to have some wine and cheese and listen back on some rough mixes that they were doing of Double Fantasy.
Yeah.
So Slick called me, and I ran down to the Hit Factory in New York, and or was it the Power Station? No, it was the Hit Factory. And at that moment, Slick was in the lobby, and he goes, "Sandy, I'm sorry to say, but John and Yoko got this phone call, and he had to leave with Yoko right away. But he said to go ahead and have your friend continue the party, you know, the listening party, but John and Yoko were not there." So I was listening to some of those Double Fantasy tracks, like Starting Over or whatever, and Slick brought me into the studio where all the instruments were set up, and I picked up John Lennon's black and white Rickenbacker and put the black and white Rickenbacker on me, and Slick goes, "If you break that, I'm fucked." He said, don't drop that. Don't even put your fingers on your strings. So I just wanted to hold that guitar, man, because I remember seeing that guitar in Ed Sullivan in 1964.
Mm-hmm.
And taking it off, Slick said, "Hey, Sandy, look at the back of the guitar." And on the back of the Rickenbacker was a Scotch taped set list of the Beatles. Beatles set list. He had it on the back of his guitar, Scotch taped and all of that stuff. So that was the closest I got to meeting John Lennon. But the Beatles were my favorite, and still is all these years later, my favorite band in the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen Ringo. I got Ringo's autograph over there on a drum head, but I never actually, I met him once when I lived in LA during my unknown period there.
Yeah.
And I passed by a shoe store, and there was a Mercedes limousine outside the shoe store. And it was like during the week on a Tuesday afternoon or something. I walked in, and the store was empty of customers, but there was Ringo and his driver sitting there trying on shoes. And and like there must have been 30 chairs with those little things that you put your foot on to try on shoes.
Okay.
And I sat right next to Ringo and pretended I asked the salesman for a pair of shoes to try on, a random pair of shoes. And "Hey, how you doing? Oh, nice to meet you. My name is Sandy. Oh, I'm Ringo." I go, "I know who you are." And that was the time I met Ringo. I was so shell-shocked. It was unbelievable. But anyway, so that was the closest I came. And then a friend of mine, David Fishoff, who's the CEO of the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, he used to be an agent for Ringo on his All-Star band.
Mm-hmm.
So I went. He invited me to one of Ringo's shows. I went, and I thought I was going to meet Ringo. I was all excited to meet Ringo after the show. And I see David Fishoff after the show, and I was looking to go backstage, and David goes, "No, man, he does his meet and greet before the show." So I went to the show. I was there on time for the show, but I didn't know that he did the meet and greet prior.
Oh.
So I thought, as usual, bands. He said, "No, when the audience is still applauding, he's in the van going back to the hotel." So I kind of missed an opportunity to meet him at that point. But I met him that one time in LA, and I did see McCartney perform on Saturday Night Live maybe about 8-9 years ago. But that's the closest. I never, aside from that encounter with Ringo, I never met Paul and held John's guitar. And my sister, who was in the medical field, did some tests on George Harrison when he was, because she works at a hospital in Staten Island. Mm-hmm. And George got some cancer treatment there at that same hospital. So my sister, she had to sign a non-disclosure agreement that she couldn't tell anybody about the fact that she was working on George Harrison. but
Yeah,
she told me. Yeah, so George ended up passing away, and George's wife, I forget his wife's name, wrote a handwritten note to my sister thanking her for,
wow.
you know, the not only my sister but the doctors that worked on George, whatever. So that there was a couple of degrees of separation there, but I would have liked to have met John personally, because he's the Beatles are my favorite band, and Lennon is my favorite Beatle for sure.
Mm-hmm. So going in order, I can imagine that too, that your time with Pat Travers touring must have been just kind of crazy.
It was kind of crazy. That basically, that gig in the early 80s, in 81, I joined his band. Actually, in December of 80, I auditioned for his band, and I was with them till about 83. And that basically, me replacing Tommy Aldrich in that band, who was already a very popular drummer, that basically put me on the map, because people wanted, who's this guy Sandy replacing Tommy Aldrich or whatever. So we did a lot of touring. We opened for Heart. We opened for Blue Oyster Cult. We opened for Ted Nugent. We opened for a lot of Rainbow. So that we toured constantly, and we did records, and then we did a tour, and then we did another record, and then we did another long tour. And in between opening for different people, we did headlined our own theater shows and biker rallies and all of that stuff. So I was very grateful to Pat for that opportunity. And we were only a 3-piece band for that first record and that first tour, which was awesome. I became very close friends with Morris Cowling, the bass player, and he ended up being my scuba instructor. So we used to go diving every twice a year when he passed now. But and then Pat called me back. As I said, I ended that gig in, I think it was 83. And then in 2010, he called me back, and I toured with him again, 2010 to 2015, and did a few records with him then. And I think he's still, I don't really pay much attention to him now, but and that's another story which I won't go into. But yeah, I'm grateful for that original opportunity. Towards the end, 2014, 2015, things started getting a little dodgy with him. And I won't go into detail with that, but it was better me separating from that situation. It wasn't very healthy.
Right. And this is just kind of general, but since in that period, especially in the late 70s, early 80s, I know there was a lot of drugs involving music. Were you always just, wary of that, and you never, yeah.
Well, yes, there was, and it was a totally different vibe surrounding cocaine and drugs in general. So yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say I never indulged, but I'm going to sit here and tell you the truth that I never indulged when I played.
Right.
If I was rehearsing with a band or I was playing a show, after the show, if it was another story. Back then bands used to have riders, which you can write down whatever you wanted to drink. And every night there was a fresh bottle, a couple of bottles of champagne, a bottle of vodka, a bottle of whatever our drink of choice was, there was a full bottle of whatever it was.
Yep.
So it was hard to stay away, and it was like a party atmosphere. And there was always parties, especially when we did some touring with Aerosmith. Are you kidding? You could just imagine. But, there was a lot of, but again, you put those activities in 2021, and it's totally different now.
Right.
Life in the backstage vibe was totally different then than as it is now. And I'm so grateful that I was born when I was born, because to be a young musician today in this environment and with the internet and the way records are made, and, it's totally different, totally different. But yeah, it was very prevalent. Drugs were very prevalent. With certain bands more than others, but it was always around. And hey, man, could I get a drumstick? And they shake your hand, and they put a little envelope with blow in your hand. Hey, thank you so much. Or you walk into Studio 54 and you run into, Ace Frehley or something. You shake his hand, and he puts a little bottle in your hand. I'll see you go to the bathroom. Don't you have to go to the bathroom, Sandy? Yeah, I guess I do, Ace.
And what was your personal opinion of women starting to do rock? like Pat Benatar and Blondie, and like once the decade broke into the 80s?
I always had the ultimate respect, especially when I got Joan Jett's gig, and I learned more about where Joan Jett started when I was in LA in the 70s. That's when she was in LA doing the Runaways.
Right.
And, you know, an all girl band in that period of time, a male dominated industry. I have so much respect for her. She deserves a movie. There is a documentary on Joan Jett, but I mean, just the fortitude and the tenacity that she had to put up with all that. I had to put up with a lot of crap with people in LA saying one thing and doing another. But she had to put up with the, hey, Joan, you can come up to my office. I'll play me your Runaways demo. Just wear a short skirt and wear some pumps. You know, it's like she was putting up with that sexual domination thing. And, you know, I always respected women. Two of my best gigs in my whole life was Cyndi and Joan. I mean, and I was, you know, I guess it goes back to my personal life where my dad died when I was 11, so I was raised by a single mother, and two older sisters. So I was raised by three women basically, and now as my life is my wife and my daughter. So I never really had brothers. I never had a big brother or a little brother, up until the age of 11, I had a dad. But you know, from the age of 11 on, I didn't really have a father figure in my life. So I grew up with an ultimate respect for women, especially looking at what my mother had to deal with as a single parent and raising three teenagers on a part-time salary. And, you know, we always had a hot meal, and we always had a Catholic education, private school, and all of that. And my mother had a tremendous amount of sacrifice, and she never drank. Well, I'm saying at a wedding, she would have a drink or whatever, but she didn't have any bad habits where she was addicted to sleeping pills or any of that shit. She was like straight. So my mother was a very big influence in how I look at women, right, in a positive way. So, I you know, you talk about Pat Benatar, Cyndi, all that stuff, man. I give them all the credit in the world, you know, for you know, in this day and age, and especially in the day and age that Cyndi was brought up in, and Joan. You know, to survive all of that, you know, sexual prejudice, if you want to put it that way, you know. Right.
And since Cyndi is, when you got that gig with Cyndi, that's obviously a different genre than rock. Did you just also take to that really easily, you know, drumming that kind of music?
Yeah, I did. I took it, you know, because Cyndi wanted me to play very simply and play for the song.
Yeah.
But she never put any governors on the volume at which I would play. So I was, you know, I learned with Lauper, and with Pat too, and Blackjack too, and the lessons that Tom Dowd gave me during the Blackjack sessions, that he taught me how to play for the song.
Yeah.
And he taught me about drum fills. Drum fill as a drum fill could be well executed and be in time, but if it doesn't fit the song, it doesn't belong there. And, you know, he told me, hey, save the fills for your clinic or save the fills for your drum solo. It doesn't belong in the song. So that set me up for playing with Travers, where I had to play. Travers was a different thing. It was odd time things going on or whatever. It was more aggressive. And there was a lot more going on drumming wise, but Lauper taught me how to play boom, ga boom, boom, ba, boom, ba, for 2.5 minutes without a fill and without not even going to a ride. She took my ride cymbal away. She goes, my drummer doesn't play with a ride. Okay. All right. So I was on a kick, snare, hi-hat for 2.5 minutes, and it taught me a tremendous amount of discipline.
Was there any similarities between playing with Cyndi and playing with Joan?
No, the similarities are they both had great songs.
Yeah.
And Joan was a little bit more rocking, you know, a little bit more Marshall stacks as opposed to keyboards. A little bit more of it was a guitar-driven band, where Cyndi had more of guitar rhythmically was there, but it was more keyboard driven.
Right.
So it taught me it taught me some discipline. It taught me how to play in consistent time. But that was a magical time with Lauper, man. I when I joined Cyndi, Joan's band, she was already a platinum artist already. But with Cyndi, I started with her when she was nobody,
Right.
And playing small clubs, opening for the Kinks, traveling in a Winnebago, and all of that. And then 5 months later, she was selling 5 million records, playing arenas.
Right.
So I saw that whole upward trajectory of the music business, in high gear.
Mm-hmm. I know after Cyndi, you played on Robin Gibb's album.
Yeah, that was in '85. Thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, that was Tom Dowd who called me. Hey, you want to play on Robin Gibb's record? I said, sure. So on that record, that was at the Middle East Studios, the BG Studios in North Miami. Tom produced it along with Maurice Gibb, one of the Gibbs. And every once in a while, being that was the BG Studio, Harry used to wander in to give a listen. So I met all three of the Bee Gees, and you can't meet better people and more hospitable. Hey, can I get you a water, Barry? Hey, can I get you a water? No, that's okay, Barry. Thanks. And they were awesome. That was a great memory. Phil Chen, the bass player, was on that. And the names, the guitar player. The guitar player was in a band at the time called Mr. Mister.
Oh, yeah.
Had some hits. And I forget, I'm spacing on the names now, but that was a really good band. Phil Chen and I became really good friends, and I was always a big fan of Phil Chen's playing because he played on a Jeff Beck record, Blow by Blow. Yeah, so that was a really good time. I got some photos of that. I got the albums right on my wall there, on the wall.
And with the
thanks for bringing that up.
Oh yeah, no problem. And I know the year after that, when you got to, because I know that the Craft album kind of has a decent following in people that like more obscure rock stuff from that time. And did you get to meet every member of Queen when you toured with them?
Yes. That was a very valuable situation for me because, as I said, I did the record and then they asked me to do the tour. And then because they were a brand new band, they didn't have much of a budget to pay me. And I'm coming off, Cindy's tour and whatever. And they didn't have, I asked for a certain amount and they couldn't satisfy it. But so I was on a couple of 3 or 4 transcontinental phone calls with the manager trying to get me to do this tour. Yep. And they ended up giving me a piece of the record. Each member of Kraft gave me a piece of the record, gave me a salary. So if the record did well, I'd get rewarded. So and that leap, they had a lot of faith in me and wanted me really bad. So I ended up doing it. And then right at the last one, we finally resolved the business. I said, "Who's this tour with this summer?" And they said, "Queen." And I went,
right.
After all that negotiation, I wouldn't have gave them such a hard time. But yeah. Queen, after our first opening, our first opening, when they were doing the set change, Brian May comes in our dressing room with his guitar, and he's all dressed for the gig, and he's warming up on his guitar. And he says, "Hey, guys, you sounded really, really good. Welcome to the tour. We're going to have a great time." He says, "If you have any issues, I want you to come to me. Don't go to your manager. Don't go to your production manager. Don't go to my road manager. Come to me, and I'll sort it out for you." He says also when we arrive in the cities, they were playing 2 and 3 nights in each city. He said on the first night when we play in each city, the record company throws us a big private party and they close a restaurant or a disco or whatever. And it's a private party. You guys are invited. Just bring your laminate. My road manager will tell your road manager where the party is. Wear your laminate and you're welcome to our party, every party that we have. So I always went. And at those parties, me and Brian, we used to hang out. Brian was the one I hung out with most. Mm-hmm. And Roger, I don't know if you see my Instagram or Facebook. If you email me after this at some point, I'll send you some pictures of me and Roger, and me and Brian. Yeah, so yeah, the only one you didn't really see at any of those parties was John Deacon, the bass player. You only saw him walking to the stage and then walking back to the dressing room. You never see him in any social occasion at all. But one night at one of these parties, Brian, about maybe a week into the tour, Brian goes, "Hey, did you ever meet Freddie?" And I said, "No." He goes, "Come on over." And I went over to the bar where Freddie was. With Brian took me over, and Freddie was with his boyfriend and a couple of security around him, and very soft spoken. Brian goes, "Hey, Freddie, this is Sandy. He's the drummer in Kraft, our opening act." "Oh, very nice to meet you, Sandy." I go, "Oh, thank you very much, Freddie. I appreciate it." He goes, "You're not from England. You're from Germany, are you?" And I go, "No, I'm from New York City." He goes, "Oh, I could tell by your accent." He goes, "Welcome to the tour." I said, "Hey, Freddie, do you mind if I like to take pictures. Do you mind if I take some pictures of you guys on stage?" He goes, "Absolutely. Just make sure you wear your laminate so you don't get thrown off stage. And make sure you're behind the curtain so the audience can't see you." So I went up on stage one night and was taking pictures of the band. And I put my Nikon on the piano, on the edge of the piano. And I took this shot as he was going, starting, "I paid my dues," Bohemian Rhapsody. And I took that shot of him. Yeah, well, there's a picture that someone gave me, James Burton autograph on James Burton was Elvis's guitar player.
Yeah.
So that's that. And then that's from a fantasy camp, me and Roger Daltrey.
Oh,
that's from another fantasy, me and Slash. And there's Benny's record up there with Travers, and then there's a second track. There's Robin's record, the Kraft record, the Joan Jett record I played on, and then the Travers. That was later on. That was the second time I was with Travers. And there's a B.B. Buell's record. But yeah, I have some memorabilia all over. That's when we toured with Ted Nugent, Travers, as Cyndi and I, me, Cyndi and Davy Jones, me and Bo Diddley, Johnny Winter, me and Lauper. And that's when the first tour I did with Joan, we opened for Robert Plant. There's Chasm, Ricky, Robert, and myself, Little Richard. Yeah, I got some memorabilia going on here, Chris. There's the Monkees tour of England, fantasy camp with Steven Tyler. Yeah, that's it. That's my mom embroidered that for me.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, I got some shit. It'll we can do a whole hour. I can just take you around my studio.
Right.
Yeah.
So is there a?
So.
Oh, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you use this? If you don't mind me asking, is this going to be published somewhere, or is this for your own benefit? Or I'm just curious of where this interview is going to go.
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. I've been doing interviews since last summer. So.
Good. Okay.
I was going to ask that there was something that you learned the most from playing with Joan, because I'm a really big fan of her too.
No, I learned, I got to know her better, obviously, and she always traveled in the same bus as us. She was a band member, even though it's her gig, and she loved the fact that it was And the Blackhearts, because she felt she thrived in being a band member and not a solo artist with backing band behind her. Mm-hmm. She likes the whole band vibe, and she traveled on the bus with us. She used, on a day off, she would go, "Hey, Sandy, you want to go to lunch tomorrow?" "Sure, we have a day off." "Sure, Joni." So we would go to lunch with me and her, and we wouldn't talk about, she wouldn't say anything about the material. She would go, how's everything at home? How's your wife doing? Whatever. You still have that dog? She was very interested in my personal life, and I got to know her really, really well. And her manager, Kenny Laguna, who been with her for 50 years or something, since I think right after the Runaways, he tried to get her first solo deal in England.
Right.
and everybody turned her down. And you know about Joan's history. They started her own label. She started Black Heart Records.
Yep.
So she thumbed her nose at the establishment. Well, you know what? Fuck you. And she got her own deal. And so it's not that I learned anything new about her, but I got to know her as a person, and it only deepened my respect for her. And I'm still in touch with her today. I'm still more in touch with Kenny Laguna. But when she comes through Nashville, I always go to see her. And I got some great pictures of that. Go to that tour. One of the really cool memories is if you're a fan of Joan, you'll appreciate this.
Yeah.
One of the cool memories I got. Let me just straighten this out because it's anal when it comes to crooked frames. So there is when we toured Japan and the Far East.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she liked to tour in out of the way places like Singapore, Thailand, and that's when we headlined Broadway, Lunfontaine Theater on Broadway, and we sold out 5 nights.
Oh, awesome!
That's a great memory. And as a matter of fact, last night on that Zoom call, I told you that I haven't seen some of these people in a long time. There's the album I played on with her.
Yeah.
Was Tommy Price. You're familiar with Tommy Price if you're a Joan Jett fan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was on the Zoom call. I know him from Staten Island when I was a teenager. Me and Tommy and Kazim Sultan used to hang out together in like high school bands. We were in rival high school bands, yeah. Even before Kazim did anything and whatever. And so that's basically what I learned about Joan that I didn't know before was that she's an awesome family-oriented person and a very smart businesswoman. She used to get on the bus with the Wall Street business section under her arm and stocks and mutual funds, and very, very brilliant woman, as is Cyndi. So again, it goes along with, she only deepened my respect for women, especially artists, underdog, you can put both of them in the underdog category. And they said, to the establishment, I'm going to do what I want to do and get out of my way. And that's what happened.
That is cool hearing that if you've known Tommy and Kazim for that long, it's kind of surprising that you didn't play on like Kazim's solo album or the album they did together or anything, because I like both of those too.
Yeah, Kazim, I still see him when I go back. He still lives on Staten Island. When I go back to visit, I have family on Staten Island. When I go back to visit, Kazim and I have lunch and stuff. And every once in a while we speak by phone. Kazim is like a brother to me. He's awesome. And Ricky too. Ricky, we did a reunion. Did you see that? Did we talk about that? Oh, you saw the Blackjack Zoom. Did you see the reunion that I did with the Blackhearts? With Kazim and Ricky? Yeah, there was a Zoom call with me, Kazim, and Ricky on it. It was awesome.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Ricky's a good friend of mine too. We stayed in touch over the years, and he's a mutual huge Yankee fan like I am.
And how did you? Because you said you were friends with in the email. You said you were friends with D.L. Byron too. How did you guys meet each other?
I think I'm not. You know what? Yeah, DL is awesome. I know him from the Blackjack days too. I think he might have even done something on that Worlds Apart record. I'm not really sure where I met him, but he was sort of like hung out with him a few times socially, long time ago. And I remember where he lived in Manhattan, but I haven't. Yeah, online we're in touch on Facebook or stuff. He comments on some of my stuff, but I don't remember where I met him. And I know he's friends with Tommy Price, and he's friends with Kazim in that circle. Jan Mulaney, who played keyboards on the second Blackjack record. I think he also played keyboards B3 on the first Blackjack record. Jan Mulaney, good friend of Michael's, also from Staten Island. So yeah, Staten Island, where I grew up, was sort of like a breeding ground of a lot of musicians from Staten Island went on to do some notable stuff. But I don't remember. I can't answer. I can't answer that question honestly about where I met DL. But he's a great friend and good friend.
Well, I know that he wrote like half the songs with Benny on the Never Run Never Hide album. So I wonder maybe if that was something to do with that.
No, yeah, he was involved in that, but he was not in the studio. Did he write that and co-write that many songs on that record?
Yeah, he wrote "She's So French" and "Hold Me Down" and a couple other ones.
Wow, I didn't realize that, but yeah, I didn't realize that, but yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I knew he was friends with Bobby and Benny. Yeah, DL kind of weaves his way into my life from a couple of different ways, you know, through Michael and Michael and Tommy Price and Chasm, and then the Benny connection. I completely forgot that he was involved in that as a writer, but he was never at any of the sessions or anything like that. So.
Oh, okay. And there's one of my friends who's like a big Monkees fan. He said there was some story with you about Richie Scarlett and the Monkees.
Yeah, Richie Scarlett is a really good friend of mine too. I played on one of his records. I forget the name. Do I have it on the wall here? No, I don't. Something about. Do you know the names of his records?
No.
Okay, I played on one of his records, but anyway, I was with the Monkees, and this is like, you know what Richie Scarlett looks like. He's like Mr. Metal Man, Mr. Rock and Roll. He's got a Keith Richards vibe to him. I love the guy, and he called me. He goes, "Hey man, you're coming into town with the Monkees, man. I really want to meet them." I said, No problem, Richie. So he comes to the gig with his wife, and he brought a whole bunch of Monkees records with him, like albums.
Oh, yeah.
And I brought him back. I brought him onto the bus where the Monkees were after the show, and he was like a fan. He was like a fan. "Hey, Davey, would you mind signing this?" He was like a really huge Monkee fan. I got a kick out of it because it was like, you know, Keith Richards going, "Hey, Davey, would you sign this for me?" You know, he was like a fan. He loved the Monkees as I did growing up. You know, he's of that age where he saw the Monkees originally when they were on TV, and so yes, the story is I just brought him on the bus, and he brought a bunch of Monkee LPs, and the Monkees. It was Mickey, Davey, and Petey. Mike wasn't on tour with us at the time, but they all signed his records, and he was like, "Oh, Sandy, thank you so much." He was very grateful. I think he framed those records or something, and I'm still in touch with him online too. Again, I moved to Nashville, so that you know, that kind of separated me geographically from a lot of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
But when I go back, I look them up, and still thankful because we have Zoom and online and Facebook and text messages and all of that. We stay in touch. I think that's a very valuable thing to do, is stay in touch with people from your past.
Right. And when you started playing with the Monkees, was that kind of daunting at all for you, considering how much you were a fan of them?
No, because you get used to right away, Chris. You get used to the fact that, you know, and when I taught at the Collective, a lot of my students would ask me that question. "Hey, I'm really good at preparing material, but when I go on an audition and the famous person walks in the room, I get stage fright, and I get, you know," and there's a really crude expression that I used, but it's really effective. I said, even though they're famous, at one point they were not famous. At one point they were not famous. They put their pants on the same way you do, or they're whatever, male or female, and nobody shits Haagen-Dazs.
Yeah.
Everybody is the same. So all you have to do is picture that famous person on the toilet.
Yeah.
And that evens the playing field right there. So I have ultimate respect for a famous person that haven't achieved their what they needed to do to become famous. But everybody's basically the same. You know, when I speak to Joan when we're at lunch by ourselves, she's just another woman in my life.
Yeah.
You know, and I look past the fact that she's Joan Jett, you know, whatever. And it's the human relationship that enables me to play with these artists for such a long time. And it's that human relationship that enables me to be in the business for as long as I do. You know what I mean? It's not an intimidation factor. Yeah, it's very cool me playing I'm a Believer, and there's Davy Jones dancing around in front of me, and I'm going, I used to watch this guy on TV. Now I'm playing his band. Now he's coming to my room and having a drink after the show. He's sleeping in my house, and he slept in my house in Staten Island. Slept over one night and helped me build a rock wall on the side of my house on a day off. I'm going, this is Davy Jones, man. So that never leaves me. I'm never jaded on that, but I'm not really intimidated, where I still am myself, and that's what people dig about me, is that no matter what the situation is, I'm still myself. And I speak to Brian May, I speak to Freddie Mercury, just like they're another person. I have the respect for them, for achieving what they achieved, but they're another person. They're another person with a heart and soul, just like you, just like me. Mm-hmm. So that's what puts us on a level playing field. Nobody shits Haagen-Dazs, basically. That's what it comes down to.
Since you're friends with some other people who are friends with, like, Meatloaf and Ellen Foley and people in his group, were you ever friends with anybody in that group too, or no?
No. I met Meatloaf one time, and that was during that Kraft tour, because Kraft asked me to bring a bass player, come over, pick a bass player from America that sang. So I had the choice of bass players. So the bass player I chose to bring over to do the Kraft tour was a guy named Steve Barslow. And at the time, he was, do you know the name?
No.
Okay, he used to be the musical director for Meatloaf at a certain point in time in the 80s. All right, so we were over in Germany touring with Kraft, and Meatloaf was doing something in Germany. So Steve took me over to the hotel where Meatloaf was staying, and I met Meatloaf at that point, about 15 minutes. The thing I remember about that meeting was we walked in Meatloaf's hotel room, and on the bed with two 4x8 plywood on the bed, there was a massive train set up, a massive Lionel train set up. And he was playing with his trains in the hotel room. Oh. That's what I remember about meeting Meatloaf. But I never, Ellen Foley, we used to gig around Manhattan when I was there, and, Chasm, and there was a whole group of musicians that were, went into the same circle. But I don't think I've ever met Ellen Foley. And I only met Meatloaf once. And then Chasm ended up being Meatloaf's musical director later on. He worked with Meatloaf too.
Right, and I know that Desmond Child was in New York at that time too, if you ever encountered him at all.
I did on one, it was around that time where I was rehearsing at that rehearsal studio in Manhattan with Blackjack, was where I met Benny. Yeah. And at another time, he was, Desmond Child was an unknown, never produced anything, but he had a band called Desmond Child and Rouge.
Right.
And it had some girls in the band or whatever, and they were rehearsing there, and I was invited in. I forget, I don't think I've ever actually met Desmond, but I was invited in just to check this band out. So I just saw them. I was in there heard a couple of songs and then left. And then he went on to, he wrote with Joan, he wrote with Bon Jovi, and he lives here in Nashville. As a matter of fact, my wife has her nails done at the same manicurist place that Desmond Child has his nails done.
Oh, yeah.
That's the closest I came to actually. I never actually met the man, but again, tremendous respect for the songs that he writes, and yeah.
I know not too long ago I interviewed Chas Sanford too, and I know that he lives out there. Do you know who that is?
No, I do not. What's his name again?
Chas Sanford. He wrote "Missing You" for John Waite, and he wrote "Talk to Me" for Stevie Nicks.
Awesome. No, I'm not familiar with him.
Okay. And just some of the last things I can ask you, just if there's any specific touring memory that you have with Blackjack, if something stands out the most.
Well, you know what? I get that question a lot, Chris. And the answer is that, and there's not really, I mean, there's one or two artists in my over half a century of playing that I'd rather not really talk about. And it's not really there's only one artist really that is not very pleasant experience. But the rest, the lion's share of all my experience, my resume, every tour or every album that I've done, every association with an artist that I've been involved with is special for another reason, for a different reason. You know, the Blackjack, that was my first thing, and that was very special, especially that first album, where Criteria with Tom Dowd and all of that. You know, and then you got Travers. That was the first time I was with Travers was very, very special. Put me on a national stage as a drummer. I got all my endorsements when I was with him. I met a lot of people in famous bands that we toured with. And then Cyndi was, you know, she was an artist on with her own ideas, and, you know, against the establishment when they told her, oh, you'll never be able to do that. She went like that, and she ended up doing it. So being with her when she was an unknown artist, and then seeing the growth of that gig to become multi-platinum, that was very, very special. Every single gig, the Craft, you know, was an opening act, and the album didn't really do much, even though I loved the material on that record. But the Queen tour, I don't need to say any more about that. That was just so special. Right. Then the Monkees was special for that other reason, where I got to be really close with people that I kind of really enjoyed growing up, watching on TV, becoming very close personal friends with Mickey Dolenz and Davey in particular. So that was special. You know, then working with Bo Diddley, of course, his name didn't come up in this conversation, but he deserves all the credit. Like Joan, you know, he was a black man touring in the 50s in a very segregated, racially injustice period. You know, that shit's still going on today, as you well know, in Minneapolis. But and he went to the Hall of Fame. Joan, again, from the humble beginnings, male-dominated industry, to the Hall of Fame, and very interested in the person as well as the player, which is very important. So, you know, Johnny Winter in the Blues Hall of Fame, and he loved the way I played a shuffle, and complimented me all the time about my playing. That was very special. I mean, all the gigs I've done have been special for one reason or another, and I can't. If I would have been hard pressed to say what was my one favorite, I couldn't say because no, I want that one. No, that one. No, you know, it's like. So yeah, there's not one special moment. They're all very special to me.
And was the gig auditioning for Rod Stewart, was there any other chances you had to audition to be in someone's band after that?
And that I didn't get?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the Rod Stewart one was in LA. That was a major one. I think I would have gotten that gig if it wasn't for the drum set. There was an audition at that same period of time in LA. I auditioned for Eddie Money when he put out 2 tickets to Paris, and I didn't get that gig. And then back in New York, I auditioned for Billy Idol, and I didn't get that gig. I think I didn't get that gig because I didn't have spiked bleached blonde hair. I had more of a rock and roll thing. I didn't have a punk thing going on. But me and Steve Stevens became friends, and I'm still friends with him today. Then there was, and then I auditioned with Lenny Kravitz. And that was kind of a nightmare kind of thing, because it was a cattle call audition. And I walked in, and he goes, he seemed a little bit, he was smoking a big fatty. With the bass player. And he goes, do you know any Hendrix? And I go, yeah. He goes, okay. And we played, I think it was Spanish Casual Magic by Hendrix. But the bass drum, the drums I had to play on was set on a linoleum floor with no carpet underneath. There was nothing to hold the bass drum back. So I started playing, and the bass drum started going. I'm trying to reach. It was skating along, the bass drum was skating along. So I didn't get that gig either. And there was one other thing. When I lived in LA, trying to get my first big break, somebody sent me an 8x10 from Minneapolis. I don't know how they got my name. I was an unknown drummer at the time, and it was Prince.
Oh wow!
It was an 8x10. It was a Prince, but this was before Prince, I think, even had a record deal. This is like late 70s, and he was dressed almost like in drag. Mm-hmm. You know, it looked like he had female heels on. So I looked at the picture and I went, So I passed on it. I actually was offered to come to Minneapolis to audition. I turned it down. Later on, when I was with Cyndi, we covered When You When You Were Mine, a Prince
Yeah.
song. And we had Prince's monitor man as our front of house mixer engineer. His name was Cubby. And he played our version, the live Cyndi Lauper version of When You Were Mine for Prince. And Prince really, really liked it. Okay, so now Cubby, when I was with Lauper, comes to New York with Prince to play Madison Square Garden. I'm standing on the side of the stage. Prince throws me one of his purple tambourines, which I've had up until recently. And at the after party, I told Prince the story. I was introduced to him by Cubby. He goes, hey, Sandy, Cubby, hey, Prince, this is Sandy. He plays drums for Cyndi Lauper. And he said, oh, man, I like what you guys do with When You Were Mine. It was great rendition, whatever. And I sat at a booth with Prince and the woman that he was with for about maybe 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I told him the story about, hey, Prince, I got an 8 by, told him a story about I got an 8 by 10, but I never responded. He goes, he touched the sleeve of my shirt, and he goes, hey, you see, you might have been wearing ruffles instead of silk. I had a silk shirt on. So He touches my shirt. He goes, you might have been wearing ruffles instead of silk if you came out and auditioned for me. So that was my Prince moment.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I like to end every interview I do with asking, what do you want your legacy to be?
What do I want? That's a really good question. What I want my legacy to be, I want people to remember me for what I did for them. Mm-hmm. I want, because, I do some motivational speaking nowadays, Chris. And the last thing I say, the last slide I show to the audience is what you do for yourself is going to die with you.
Yeah.
What you do for others is immortal. So it's not about what you do for yourself or the things you have. It's about how you make people feel when you're in contact with them. You know what I mean? It's this is a case in point. I don't know you from Adam. You reached out for an interview, but I engaged you, and I'm engaging you now for the last hour and 15 minutes, like I would engage a reporter for Rolling Stone magazine. Mm-hmm. You're no different. You're no different than a reporter from Rolling Stone magazine. The interview might be going in different places, but you're a human being just like me. And the Rolling Stone interviewer is just like you. He may have a better job or a more lucrative or more high-profile job, but he's just like you. And I treat everybody the same. And that's how I ended up getting Cyndi Lauper's gig. Backstage at a Travers show in 1981, I engaged this fan who was basically asking for a bunch of stuff like a sign and a picture and help him get a gig in New York because I didn't have time. People were waiting on the bus, but I engaged the guy.
Yeah.
And I gave him my home address and my home phone number. I said, if I can help you in any way in the future, call me. And it turned out 3 years later, it was Dave Wolf who ended up managing Cyndi. He goes, you were so nice to me in that doorway. I want you to play in Cindy's band. I go, no, I'm not going to join a new band. I'm coming off an arena tour. He invited me to the studio, and I met Cyndi. I ended up joining her band. And that was the biggest tour I ever did, all because I spent 5 minutes in the doorway with this guy a couple of years earlier. And on that Cyndi Lauper tour, I met the woman that became my wife, and we're together for 35 years. Because of that 5 minutes in the doorway. Do you understand what my point? It's like what you do for other people without looking for anything in return, you end up getting back tenfold. Mm-hmm. So that's my legacy. I want people to think about me, all the students that I've ever had, teaching them how to play drums and watching the light bulb go off when they finally get a beat. And I want people to remember me for what I did for them and how I engaged them. That's what I want my legacy to be.
Well, thanks. This was a really cool interview. Lots of cool stories.
I appreciate it, Chris. Well, thank you. And again, I apologize for that little tap dance last night, but yeah, it all worked out. All's well that ends well.
Yeah, I've been a fan of Blackjack since I was like in 9th grade. So
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you know what? Later on, why don't you send me your address in Minneapolis?
Oh, okay.
All right. Spell your last name, because I know it's a little difficult to spell for me. So spell your last name and give me your address in Minneapolis, and then look for your mail. Look at your mailbox in about 5 days.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
All right. And good luck with your interview. What do you do? What do you do in a nutshell? Because I have another interview with not an interview, but a meeting in about 10 minutes. But do you go to school now? What's your life about? When you get off the computer now, what are you going to do the rest of the day?
Well, I went to school for voice acting a little while ago because that was kind of what my dream job was. But since I've been interviewing people, I kind of would maybe like that to be a focus now. And because the first person I talked to was Billy Steinberg. Do you know who that is?
No.
He wrote Like a Virgin and So Emotional and I'll Stand By You and like huge songs.
Oh, awesome.
And that kind of just snowballed from there. So right after I got him, and I usually do a new one like every week, like once a week. So
good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, good luck with that, man. If I can help you out with anything, let me know.
Oh, great. Thanks.
All right. And thanks for some really interesting questions. I appreciate the preparation. I noticed you were looking at your little notes on the side, but that's really, really good that you prepped it and there was no dead air, which is really cool. And some really pertinent questions. I appreciate it. And you're a fan, which is really, really cool. You know the history, which is awesome.
Yeah, I make a point of I don't typically interview anybody that I'm not like a personal fan of, so it makes it easier.
Awesome. Yeah. Makes it much easier. Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.